Hey guys, Peter here to tell you about the latest from Glasya, Attarghan, out February 18th on Scarlet Records. This album has 15 tracks, 67 minutes in length, and this is the band's second full-length studio album. They are a Portuguese symphonic metal band. And for this record, they put together a concept of a Persian rebel commander and the story surrounding him. And that's all I'm going to say, because I want you guys to discover the characters, the story, the album the same way I did by listening to it. Now, as far as the structure goes, the album is deeply tied in to the story as you would expect it. You need to have a beginning, middle, and end. You need to create a record that's fluid, that carries the listener through each and every single song, that carries the listener through the story itself, keeps the listener connected, and you don't feel overburdened by the experience across 15 tracks in 67 minutes. Not always an easy thing to do, but they added extra elements that help tell the story and bring the story to life. By having a narrator, by having the characters speak in the first person, and intros and outros, creating interludes, all of these things make the record feel more complete. It allows you to not just depend only on the lyrics of a song, on the sound, on the atmosphere that that sound creates in order for you to know where you are, where the characters are, what's happening to them. No, you hear them speak, you understand exactly where you are in the story at any given time of this record. And that increases the playability of the album and makes the album more engaging, easier to listen to, easier to digest, and obviously that has an incredible impact in the overall playability. Now, once you go into the soundscape, this is a cinematic record. I mean, you're telling a story, you have to make it cinematic. So you have to make it big, you have to make it robust, it has to be larger than life. And I also like the movement that the sound has on this record. It's not a one-size-fits-all, robust style approach, cinematic vibe from beginning to end. Depending on the mood of the story, depending on the mood of the song, the soundscape changes and morphs. It goes with it. It helps define the shapes of that story. So if you have a battle scene, the songs become bigger, almost power metal driven style tracks. If it goes more into a dark corner of the story itself, then obviously it becomes a little bit more stripped out. It goes into a different mood, into a different atmosphere, and the sound follows that. So this is a very important element that adds life to the experience. It adds life to the overall creation of the record. One thing in the sound that I wasn't a big fan of is that I felt that over time, the album feels overly grounded. It feels like it has too much bass in it. It just adds volume, it adds heaviness at times, but it doesn't really help define the clear-cut understanding of what these elements are doing, all the different pieces of the puzzle are creating, and how this sound could be a little bit lighter at times, specifically in songs that have that nature behind them. I could understand in tracks that you want to create heaviness, to have that grounding effect in the soundscape. It helps create heaviness through the volume, through the robust nature of the songs. But in certain tracks where you feel like the song needs to levitate a little bit, it needs to get a little bit of air under its sails, that grounding really brings the mood down and it really brings the track down. It doesn't hurt the storytelling, it doesn't hurt the visual effect that the record creates, but it doesn't help define all of the different parameters that this album could offer. Now, this is also a record that I don't feel is driven by one single element. I can't say that this is a guitar-driven album or is driven by the vocals or drums or even orchestrations. This is a record that depends on all the different pieces to come together and work in parallel, in unison, in order to create a rich environment for the listener. Having said all of that, two elements really stand out just because I enjoyed the impact that they had on the record itself, and that is the orchestrations and guitars. The orchestrations on this album walk that fine line between creating atmosphere, having a positive impact on the soundscape, but not really calling on the spotlight at every single turn. This is an album that doesn't do that, and that's important. And normally these records with this story, with this kind of concept, with this kind of idea, always go down that avenue, and that takes a little bit away from everything else. I didn't feel like that happened on this album, and that was a positive because it allows you to experience the record, it allows you to experience the orchestrations blending in with everything else that is happening around them, and you're more focused on the story, you're more focused on the experience that you're getting out of the song and not necessarily on one single element. The same could be said for the guitars. They really drive a lot of the movements within this record, bringing in some heaviness, some chunkiness, some melody, allowing the songs to have more energy or have less energy. So they are a little bit of the fuel to the fire that this whole album has in store. But they never feel flat, they never feel like they're going always in the same direction. They're constantly moving, morphing, growing, expanding, contracting, depending on what the song calls and depending on which portion of the song you're currently in. So these two elements while playing an important role, at least a role that I really enjoyed, I still feel like they're blended in with everything else, and this is an album that lives off of the collective. Now, as far as the vocals are concerned, I thought the approach here was outstanding. I mean, Eduarda is phenomenal. She has an incredible voice, and technically she could carry the record all by herself, and in a lot of times it really feels like she's doing that. But by adding choirs, by adding layers, textures, backing vocals, harsh vocals, the character speaking in the first person, I thought that was phenomenal. The narrator, you just have a lot as far as the vocal tracks are concerned. But I really feel like you needed that. Sometimes it's harder for the listener to stay connected with an album that moves across 15 songs in 67 minutes if you're always listening to the same voice. So having these changes allow the sound to change as well and the vocals to change with it. So it's an album that's mobile across all the different elements, not just one, all of them. And that to me is a winning formula for a record that has this concept, this story, and that wants to go as deep as they went as far as the concept goes. Now, overall, this album is rich. It has a lot to give. It has a lot to offer. I really like all of the different dynamics that it has. I really enjoy the narrator and the character speaking in the first person. I thought that was phenomenal in order for me to just really understand where I was within the story and connect with the characters. But this is an album that's not going to be easy to digest for the average listener. If you're looking at listening to a song here and a song there, these tracks, while working on the individual basis, they're not as strong as they are within the collective. So this is a record that really requires time. You have to sit down, press play, and go all the way through it, the same way you would do with a book, the same way you would do with a movie. You can't just try to take these songs out of the context of the record and hope that they give you everything that they have for you, because it's not going to happen. Now, as far as favorite songs are concerned, I want to start off with Way to Victory. I love this track, has great choirs to start off. That adds power to the sound and it gives movement to the song. Eduarda's voice is phenomenal. It brings that cinematic atmosphere to the track itself. And it allows the song to have this big, bright light to it. It's a song that has a lot of movement, that has a lot of life, that feels almost like a symphonic power metal song at times. Sprinkling in some harsh vocals adds texture. It doesn't really change that much within the track, but it definitely adds texture and it adds depth to the quality of the track itself. The chorus is phenomenal. You have Eduarda's voice, you have the choirs behind it. It just feels magnificent. It's just larger than life. It explodes. For a song that feels larger than life throughout its entirely, versus end chorus, the chorus just turns it all the way to 11 and makes the track feel so energetic and it has so much to give, both musically and vocally. Next, you have Battle for Trust, a track that brings in a ripping guitar sound that I absolutely love. Sometimes it comes in a little bit more into the forefront, then it drops in a little bit more into the background, but I really connected with that guitar sound and what the guitars were doing throughout the entire song. Still using layers as far as the vocals goes in order to weave the story into the sound, allow them to all become one and becoming really hard to break them apart in order to better define them. There is some heaviness within this track, and I feel like the heaviness exists because the track doesn't move as fast as Way to Victory. Not to say that it's methodic, because it's not. It still has movement, but what it loses in movement, it gains in heaviness. It becomes a little bit bigger. It feels a little bit more robust because that heaviness comes hidden in the overall soundscape. And that has an impact because you feel like bass, drums, guitars are all working together in order to give that movement, but that slower movement that carries that heaviness with it. Really interesting approach. It works really well for this song, and it's a song that has moments that really feel like a cinematic score. When you listen to this track, you just have that essence into it. But then the track itself morphs back into how it started, so it goes full circle with that cinematic score piece right in the middle of it, not quite in the middle, but in the last third of it, that really breaks the track apart and allows you to get a different feel for what this song is all about. Last but not least, We Weren't Meant to Be. This is a ballad, a symphonic ballad that I thought was phenomenal. Eduarda carries this song through and through. It's a very stripped down track. It really depends on her voice in order to move. It depends on her voice to create the atmosphere. It depends on her voice to carry the story for you to understand where you are and to add the atmosphere that you need. That essence of darkness, that essence of sadness that this track carries through is not just in the soundscape, it's also in her vocals and her delivery and how she comes across. This is it. This is Glasya with Attarghan, out February 18th on Scarlet Records. Let me know your thoughts on the band, on the singles. Use the comment section below. I'll be reading those and getting back to you. Take care, guys.